Welcome to Life Stories. Today, we bring you a powerful tale of strength, resilience, and standing up for what's right. In this story, a woman faces the ultimate betrayal from her own mother, who tries to manipulate her into letting her move in. What follows is an emotional journey of defending her peace and exposing the truth. Despite years of emotional abuse, this story will show you how taking control of your own life can lead to freedom, even when it means confronting the ones who should have supported you the most. Please subscribe to our channel to start today's story. It all started on a quiet afternoon when my mother, who had never been part of my life in a meaningful or nurturing way, suddenly showed up at my door. I was sitting in the living room with my husband, Jack, having a peaceful moment when the doorbell rang. At first, I didn't think much of it. We weren't expecting anyone, but perhaps it was a neighbor or a delivery. When I opened the door, I froze. Standing there, in front of me, was my mother. I hadn't seen her in over a year. Not since she had caused chaos the last time we had spoken. The last time I had let her into my life. Her face was the same as always, stern, unapproachable, a little cold, and she stood there, looking at me, as if nothing had ever changed between us. "Since you have a spare room," she said matter-of-factly, "I'm moving in." I stood there for a moment, stunned. My brain didn't seem to process the words at first. Was this some sort of sick joke? Surely, she couldn't be serious. She had never been involved in my life beyond the bare minimum of what was required. Growing up, I had never felt like a priority to her. I was more of an obligation, something to be dealt with until I could manage on my own. Which, I learned early on, was her way of preparing me for the world. I remembered being 16 when I got my first job. 17 when I had to pay rent to live under my own roof. By 18, I was kicked out of the house because, according to her, my house isn't a charity. So, I had taken the lessons she had taught me and, with determination, built a life for myself. I worked hard through college with scholarships, found an incredible man in Jack, and together we created a home filled with peace, a peace I never had growing up. But now, standing at my door, she was declaring she was moving in. I laughed, thinking this had to be some twisted joke. "You're kidding, right?" I asked, smiling nervously. She didn't smile back. There was no hint of humor in her expression. "No, I'm not joking. I need a place to stay. That room is empty." My laughter faded as I processed her words. My initial shock turned into confusion. Why was she even asking me? She had made it abundantly clear growing up that we were a burden. She had always believed that kids were something women had to deal with as part of their duty in life, not something to nurture or cherish. She had never been the warm, motherly type. I don't think I even knew what love from a mother felt like. But here she was, standing in my home, telling me she needed a place to stay. She spoke like it was the most natural thing in the world. She wasn't asking, she was demanding. "No," I said firmly, "that's not happening." Her response was immediate, and for a moment, I could see the frustration building in her eyes. "Of course, it is," she scoffed. "You're my daughter. You owe me." I could feel my blood start to boil. Owe her? What exactly did I owe her? She had made it clear since I was old enough to understand that I was not her priority, that I was a burden she wished she could shed. Yet, here she was, in my life, demanding something I wasn't prepared to give. I stood my ground. "No, you're not moving in here. Mom, I'm not doing this." But she didn't stop. She didn't even acknowledge my refusal. It was as if my words had no weight, no meaning. She kept going, talking over me as if my opinion didn't matter. She told me how her landlord was raising the rent, how she was sick of working, how it was time for her children to take care of her. I could feel her voice growing louder, as if she was trying to convince me that this was something I had to do, that it wasn't a choice. I shook my head, disbelieving. "No," I said again, this time more resolute. "That's not happening." She scoffed, throwing her hands up in the air. "Unbelievable," she muttered before storming out of the door, calling me ungrateful as she left. I thought, at that moment, that the situation was over, that she would leave, accept my answer, and go away. I couldn't have been more wrong. The very next week, I was sitting in the living room again, enjoying a quiet moment with Jack when I heard a truck pull up outside. It wasn't unusual for us to get deliveries, but something about the rumble of this truck made me uneasy. I peered out the window and nearly dropped my cup of tea when I saw my mother standing outside, directing movers as they pulled up to my house. They were unloading furniture, a couch, boxes, and, of course, a bed frame. I shot up from the couch, rushing to the door. "What the hell are you doing?" I yelled, stepping outside. She looked at me, her expression bored, as though it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I'm moving in," she said, completely unfazed by my outrage. At that point, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Surely, this had to be a joke. But the movers weren't laughing. They were just doing their job, pulling boxes and furniture out of the truck and towards the house as if it was normal. "No," I said, my voice firm. "You are not moving in here." She rolled her eyes, sighing dramatically. "Don't be so dramatic. I'm your mother. Of course, I'm moving in." I stood in the doorway, refusing to let her in. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking. I couldn't believe this was happening. But she was so intent on bulldozing her way into my life, as she always had. I had never expected this. Never thought she would have the gall to invade my home in such a way. And that's when Jack stepped up. He had been watching from the porch. And when he saw how serious things were getting, he calmly walked up beside me. He crossed his arms, looked at my mother, and in the coldest voice I had ever heard, said, "Take your things and get off our property. Now." My mother blinked, clearly stunned. She wasn't used to anyone standing up to her, much less my husband. I had spent my whole life being manipulated and controlled by her. But Jack wasn't having it. He was done with her attempts to control our lives. My mother's reaction was swift. She shrieked in a rage, her voice rising to a high-pitched scream that could be heard across the neighborhood. She was furious, shouting about how this was her right, how she had raised me, how I owed her everything. But I wasn't listening anymore. My blood was boiling, but I was resolved to keep my ground. She stormed off in the end, calling me every name in the book. But the damage was done. I knew it wasn't over. In fact, I had no idea just how deep the rabbit hole was about to go. I thought it was over, that my mother had stormed off and would go lick her wounds. But I was wrong. The very next morning, my phone started buzzing with calls and messages. At first, I thought it was just a normal day. But when I saw the dozens of missed calls from my sister, my aunt, and even a few cousins, my heart sank. I had a bad feeling in my gut. This was only the beginning. I tried to ignore the pit forming in my stomach. But when I opened my messages, my fears were confirmed. "How could you throw your own mother out on the street? You're a terrible daughter. She sacrificed so much for you. And this is how you repay her?" The messages kept coming in, one after another, filled with accusations and guilt. I wanted to scream. I wanted to explain myself, to tell them the truth. But I knew that wasn't going to be enough. Not with her already spinning her version of events. My sister called just as I was reading the last message. When I answered, she was already yelling, her voice sharp with anger. "Are you serious? Mom told everyone you kicked her out with nowhere to go. You and Jack just tossed her onto the street, with all her things, and left her to fend for herself," she screamed into the phone. I was shocked. "That's not what happened," I said, my voice trembling. "She came to me and demanded to move in. She didn't ask for help. She demanded it, like she had the right to take over my house." I could hear my sister's voice waver. "I know, but half the family thinks you're the villain now. Mom's telling everyone how she begged you for a place to stay. And you and your controlling husband threw her out. She's staying with Aunt Maria right now, crying her eyes out about how cruel you are." The frustration and anger inside me started to boil over. How could she be twisting the story like this? I felt the years of emotional abuse and manipulation creeping back in, flooding my thoughts. I had worked so hard to get away from all of this, to create a peaceful life with Jack. And now she was dragging me back into her toxic mess. "Half the family?" I muttered. "It's not true. None of it is true. She's lying. I don't know what she's telling you. But I didn't throw her out. I just told her no." But the damage was already done. My sister wasn't the only one calling. By the time I hung up, I had messages from a dozen family members, all asking me the same thing. How could you do this to her? I didn't know what to say. I knew how she worked, twisting the truth, playing the victim, making everyone else feel guilty while she walked away unscathed. I had lived through it for years. But this time, she had crossed a line. She wasn't just lying about me to my family. She was trying to ruin my reputation. The next blow came when I found out that she had called my workplace. I couldn't breathe when I heard it. She had called my office and told them that she was homeless and that I had abandoned her. She claimed I was a terrible person, that I didn't have the moral character to be trusted, and that I had left her on the street. She had gone that far, using her own daughter's livelihood to try to make herself look like the martyr. I was shaking with anger. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was an all-out attack on my character. She was willing to destroy everything I had worked for, just to maintain control over me. The next few days were a blur. My phone was constantly ringing. People were messaging me on social media, and I was left explaining myself over and over again. It was exhausting, but what hit me hardest was the feeling of betrayal from people I had once been close to. The relatives who had blocked me, who had unfriended me without even giving me a chance to explain. All of them had been sucked into her web of lies. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter. I had Jack, I had a home, and I had my peace. But the truth was, I was deeply hurt. I never imagined that she could go this far to tear me down. And now, it wasn't just family who had turned on me, it was the whole world. But as I sat there, feeling the weight of her betrayal on my shoulders, something shifted inside me. For years, I had been reacting to her manipulations, to her demands. But now, for the first time, I realized I had the power to change the narrative. I wasn't going to let her control me anymore. I was going to take the first step, and she wouldn't see it coming. I wasn't sure yet how I was going to fight back. But I was determined. This wasn't going to end with her winning. Not this time. As the days passed, I started to gather my strength, deciding I wasn't going to let my mother's lies define me any longer. I took action. The first step was to call my workplace and explain the situation. I spoke to our, providing them with the truth about my mother's manipulations and lies. They listened, reassured me they believed my version, and even warned me to be cautious, as they were aware of her history. Next, I took control of my personal affairs. I froze my credit, changed all my passwords, and set up two-factor authentication everywhere I could. It was clear she was trying to invade my life on every front, from my finances to my reputation. But this time, I wasn't going to let her succeed. I contacted a lawyer, started documenting everything, and began digging into my mother's past. What I uncovered was shocking. She wasn't just a manipulative person, she was a criminal, involved in scams, fraud, and deceit. I carefully crafted my response. And when the time was right, I shared the truth. I sent everything I had to my family, her landlord, and even the police. The fallout was immediate. Her attempts to destroy my life backfired spectacularly. Family members who had supported her turned against her. Her landlord sued her, and worst of all for her, she was arrested. It was a relief, but also bittersweet. The woman who had tormented me for so long was now facing the consequences of her own actions. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. I no longer had to live under her shadow or worry about her manipulating me. I moved forward with peace in my heart, knowing that I had done the right thing. If you've been dealing with similar struggles, take this as a lesson. Never let anyone manipulate your life or control your peace. Stand up for yourself, and sometimes, the truth really does set you free. Thank you for reading this life story. Please subscribe to our channel for more life-changing stories and inspiration.